Hi, I'm Steve the Skies, and welcome back to another one of my track walkthroughs. This time I'm going to be walking through I Have to Let You Go, which is one of my latest releases out on Elevation Records. Yeah, let's see how I made it. Let's dive into the project and find out. So we've got the project file open here. I'm going to just play you through some of the sections of this. It's kind of a little intro. And then we get into kind of the main groove of the track. First break. This is the kind of main melodic motif that runs through the whole record. So nice twinkly bits. Quite deep, moody, quite spacey. Anyway, we build up, get back into get the drums back, and then pads start to open up a bit here. Okay, then kind of build into crescendo. Then we get this lovely little instrument. It's called an erhu. It's a Chinese bowed instrument, apparently. I found a sample to use in this, so I'll show you how I did that in a second. And then we get a vocal that kind of, this spoken word vocal.
What could it be now?
Really nicely picked out, actually. It's a lovely vocal, lovely sample.
Are we dreaming?
And then,
I have to let you go.
get back in. Now with this kind of growly sort of bass kind of coming in, and then we build to crescendo, hands in the air, everyone has a wonderful time, and that's the track over. Alright, you get the idea. So the question is, how do I put all that together? So let's jump into the project. We'll start with the drums, backbone of any track. So we've got this kind of like quite a lot of loops in this project, which is unusual for me. I tend to build most things from scratch, but we've got this kind of drum loop here, which is doing some hats. We've got a deep loop, which is giving us some grit and body in the drums. Then we've got a shaker, of course. These kind of cool little ghost hat things, which very rhythmic and groovy. You don't necessarily hear them really loud in the mix, but they actually are adding a lot of groove. Claps, they're quite prominent, and then this little noise actually is carried all the way through, and it's not always that audible, but it's always kind of just doing little, working away there in the background, just making things happen. Some Foley just to add some weird gritty interest, and then the shaker and hat, these two here, all this stuff is just EQ'd a little bit, really. Sometimes I add some compression to things like the claps and stuff just to kind of help them sit up in the mix a little bit, but most of this is just EQing, and that's giving us some body, and that's giving us some top. It just sits in there nicely, and then there's a bit of a ride there as well, which I've got from a sample by the looks of things I liked, and put some hass on it to split it out a little bit. So yeah, this is quite cool. This little crescendo thing, I use this in quite a lot of tracks instead of a snare roll. So what we've got here is just a hi-hat sample like this. I put a vocoder on it, fairly wet, and then release is automated. So you can see that at the start of this, it feels like a hit, and then by the end of it, it feels just like white noise. So it's quite cool. You get the sense of it like emerging, and then you put some panning on just to move it about a tiny bit, give more interest, and a bit of a filter, and the filter then just allows it to come, and you can hear it gives this sense, just this sense of it, like so it's a bit more subtle than a snare roll. It doesn't have that sense like it's coming. It's just a bit more like the whole track is emerging into the next phase of where it wants to go and where it wants to evolve to. So that is, oh yeah, there's some white noise. I actually quite often do the white noise in that way as well with a vocoder. I mean, obviously you can just get a synth and just use the noise setting on any kind of decent synth. We'll have that. But if you listen to this white noise, very nice, like very kind of rounded, and it's got a lot of body to it. So it's a nice way to do white noise. You just don't get quite as much control as you would with a synth. So there's a bit of a trade-off. So yeah, that's the drums, and then I suppose connected to all that, you've got the kick. Let's just do the kick and the toms without the bass. There we go. So the kick is this sample. It's from Audio Tent. It's called Royal F Sharp. I've tweaked it a bit down just to get it into the key of the track. I think this track might be in kind of C or something, so I put that into E just to put it in as a third, and then sitting in there. So it's real deep kick actually. A lot of body in the bottom of that. So I've had to EQ some of that off quite tightly at the bottom around about 27. And I could have cut a bit out of the middle here. There's a bit of middle in this. Maybe that section there. I could have EQ'd that a bit more, but I didn't. So there you go. And it sounded all right. So there you are. And then toms. Yeah, there's a nice little tom groove here. On these tom grooves, always add groove, right? I mean, I tend to add groove to all my drums, to be honest with you, because it just gives the whole thing a sense of swinging a bit more. But I use this Logic 16 Swing 53. I use this a lot. You see the immediate difference. It's subtle. One feels like a robot's doing it. The other one feels like a human might be at work. It's much, much better. And it makes your whole body want to kind of groove. So we're always thinking about that when we're making dance music. How are people going to dance to it? So that's good. Let's jump into the bass. So the bass is... let me see. Here we go. That's what the bass sounds like. It's 3 layers. We've got a sub layer. We've got a mid layer. And then we've got a kind of another mid layer, but that's just providing kind of body, I guess. This has got a lot of grit in it. Whereas this is just giving us a bit more depth and warmth. Warmth, that's the word. So let's see what we're doing first of all with the sub. So the sub is a diva setting here called Simple Sub. This comes from Tom Wolf's Deep Basses. Lots of really nice bass samples in that pack. Simple Sub, add a bit of saturation, bit of EQ, filter at the top end, compression, limiting, pretty standard bass chain. You can see the compression and the limiting is basically holding that bass in place in one spot. I don't want that moving around too much. It's pretty steady. And then I've got some side chaining. I've just got a standard every 4 beat side chain. That's not using kickstart here. You can see that's just cutting the front, the top of that bass off, the front of that bass off every 4 beats. It's not actually linked to the kick. It's just doing it automatically. And then I've got another one which is actually linked to the toms. So you can see it's making space for both, and it's not clashing with anything. Right. So that's good. Then we've got this kind of next layer, which is where a lot of this is where a lot of fun's happening in the bass, really. You can see all the automations in here. This is another sample, I think, from Tom Wolf. Yeah, Tom Wolf's Deep Bass is called Chords Up, this preset. I've fiddled around with it, taken some reverb off, adjusted the adjust the envelope for the filter a little bit, but apart from that, it's pretty much there. EQ'd a bit off the bottom because there's a lot of sub in there now. Added some effect rack here. This is Decapitator. There's a Sound Toys effect rack. Get one of these if you can. Everything in here is just such high quality. I use Decapitator on everything. So yeah, to see the way I dialed that in though, it's quite gentle, quite subtle, you know. So I've just dialed in the drive to there, and then you could. So I've got this fully wet, but one thing you could do is take that dry down and then add more of this and just dial that into taste. So you could have lots more drive and a drier sample, or you could do what I've done there, which is make it quite wet and then just keep it quite subtle. And then honestly with these, I just fiddle about with them until I get the one that I like the sound of. It's like, oh, that one sounds good, we'll use that one. These are just different kind of emulators. They emulate different saturators. So yeah, I'm also using this, which is Animate, which is a interesting little plugin from Mastering the Mix, which just helped things sound a bit bigger. So if you listen to where that was before, no. So it's just, everything's just expanded. It's got literally the settings called grow. It just widens things. There's other things you could use there. I could have even used in here. I could have used microshift as well. Possibly would have got a similar sort of an effect. So let's just put that away. All right. And there's a filter on this and so on, and obviously more side chaining. This time not as much. I mixed it fully on that. And then the next layer is this layer here. We just have a look here and see. Actually, you can see, we'll use span to show this. So this layer is occupying this section. So I'll start that again. So the sub is taking up all the bottom end. This one is occupying there. This one, do you see? This is clever. So did you see that there was like in this middle one? So the kind of like growly one. There's just this area here that's not. It's kind of in that range there. It's not always getting filled up. And so what we've done is we've just added some body to fill that space up a little bit, because that 100 to 200 range, that's a really important range for bass. If it doesn't sound kind of very big in there, I tend to find that the bass ends up sounding a bit weak. I mean, there's lots of other things you can do, like it depends on the kick sample you're using and what your low mids are like and all sorts, but I think making sure there's a bit of presence and warmth in that 100 to 200 range is really important. So I've just added this in to do that. This again, it's simple. It's that simple sub preset, but just raised up an octave, and processed in a pretty similar way. So that's just giving a lot of. That's the bass. Now the other part of the bass, which comes into the second part, is this. Oh yeah, that's cool, huh? Yeah, how are we doing that? Right, okay. Let's look at what that looks like. So, this is actually, again, a Tom Wolfe. This is like an ad for Tom Wolfe, this track walkthrough. His preset packs are very good. I can't deny that. And I've used a lot of them on this project. So, this is a preset from his Noir pack. I bought like all of the Tom Wolfe. It was like an ultimate bundle. This is the Noir pack, and this is called Flex Return, and I've probably done some fiddling with it here, like I've taken off a bit of the internal effects and maybe shorten the amount of the length of the notes and things like that. But then I've added some EQing, some filter, and then what the kind of echoey effects you can hear are actually sent out to the returns. So I've got this going out to a reverb return, and the reverb return has got some of this Waves H reverb on it, about nearly 5 seconds of reverb, kind of medium size. And then you've also got a delay, which I call dotted delay. You can hear, and that's just a classic kind of triplet delay, and again some EQ on that. So without it, doesn't have quite the same. And then what that allows me to do, because I've got it on the returns, is on these drops here, I can build up, I can add more. And then the tail of that delay will keep going. Because if I put it on the channel and use a dry wet knob, when I go back to dry at the end of that drop, then it's going to cut the delay off. So it'll build up and just go bang. And you might want that effect. That's an effect you can go for. But I wanted it to kind of throw the delay out over the next few bars of this bass. So that's why I used it on the return channel. And the filter's quite important here. Because if you go without it, it's just doesn't have the same movement. So I've got it set to full LFO, 1 bar. So they're getting that. It's recycling every 1 bar, and just about midway through. And sort of, what is that, at about 1,000 kilohertz. And then I can release that a bit again to build towards drops and things like that. So it's just there, kind of chunking away. It doesn't have a lot of actual bass on, ironically. It's cut off at about 300. So this is where you can use bass sounds for the top end, because the top end of a bass actually is kind of a cool thing. It's got a lot of like this kind of grittiness in it, can add lots of interest. So yeah, that's what you can do there. All right, so that's what we've got in the bass. Let's go to the melodic elements, which is the kind of like, this is the main course of the meal, right? It's where everything happens. I read that your ear basically focuses a lot on this mid-range. Like your ear is looking for the mid-range to find, because that's where the human voice is, and it's where lots of the kind of things we need to hear in the world, out in the world. So our ears evolved to hear mid-range. So you've got to put a lot of stuff in there. That's why we're listening out for the melodies of a track. So what's going in here? We've got this kind of atmospheric loop that's just sitting in the background. It's just a sample. Added lots of things like delays and reverbs and just softened it, a bit of phaser to widen it. Then I've got the main melody. Now this main melody, I've used a different synth on this actually. This is use Anna 2. So Anna 2 is a synth from Sonic Academy, and it's really, really good for these kind of like trancey pads. So this is what I tend to use it for. I'm sure you can use it for everything. It's a complete workhorse synth. I mean, there's loads of stuff you can do with it, but I like it for this kind of like real, very trancey sounding stuff. And you can hear then I've just, it looks complicated, but basically I'm automating the cutoff. There you go. And then I can relive my days at Gatecrasher. Yeah. Anyway, let's stop that. Having too much fun. What else have I put on that? There's a bit of effect rack with, yes, that's right, Decapitator. What a surprise. Some EQ, some delay, more EQ, glue compression. Oh yes, let's talk about Soothe too. We've got Soothe on here. Quite often I'll notice as I'm producing that there's just some like clusters of noise emerging in certain areas, like in the track, it'll be like, oh, that there's just a lot of instrumentation going on in one part. Sometimes I'll use soothe to just say, well, I want to take those elements, those frequencies out of that range on this instrument. So it's probably just there's been a bit of a build up around about the 500, this mark here in this synth, and I just wanted to remove it. You can use soothe for so many things. It's so versatile. It's got a brilliant sidechain feature, which is very clever. And then kick starts, just to kick a little bit of sidechaining on all of these instruments in the mid-range, just ever so slightly brings it out of the way of things like the kick, click, like the click of the kick. So if you listen to that, it's just still allowing that quite boomy kick to kind of just poke through. Anyway, then alongside this, I have another layer going. It's just there. It's quite subtle, but I just wanted something else in here, the low mids. I wanted some more low mids in there. So this is just a kind of a pretty, like kind of a Rhodes type thing. Again, I swear to God, Tom Wolfe isn't paying me. This is from Arceus, from Tom Wolfe's pack, called Once in a Life. I didn't realize I'd used so many of his presets in this one track. I should send him some royalties or something. So this is Once in a Life, and it's like a Rhodes sample. It's really cool. I think I was just going through his packs and going, right, I've got to use some of these. I must have got them a while back and was like, I've got to use them. They are actually great. And then we've got Decapitator on there, and a bunch of other stuff. EQ, glue compression, soothe again. So yeah. So that's the main melody. This is quite cool. I'm gonna just loop this so that we can hear it a few times. That we have to keep resetting the project. So this is Diva. This is a preset I have made myself based on one of the presets I think it comes with Diva. It's called BS Pluckers, and then I've just added a bunch of stuff in the LFOs. I've added an LFO to it to kind of LFO filter, and then some delay and some reverb, and it's a real cool and a bit of noise on top, and it just kind of got this kind of real very cool like melodic techno sort of vibe to it. And then yeah, just adding a bit of saturation and compression, but this is a sort of a transitional idea. Just transitions one part into another part, and again, these can be interesting things to do to get out of the kind of habit of just like a reverse cymbal or something, which I also use. There's nothing wrong with that, or white noise or something. They're all fine, but it's just that sometimes you might want to do something a bit different to kind of keep interest going, and it's that sort of little ear candy that people go, oh, I haven't heard that before. That's new and unusual, and that's what gets people hopefully listening to your tracks over and over again. So then we've got here, let me just open up this a bit. We've got this that starts to come in here. Just an open choral thing that kind of to help the whole track feel like it's growing at this point. So we get this real sense of space. And then this pad is also growing all the way through. So if you look here, very, very real simple pad. This, I think it's this is Anna 2 again. This is just like their initialization patch. I think I've probably just fiddled with it a bit. It's like a simple saw wave kind of thing, this, and it starts off quite low and subtle, and then I just actually using the filter here, auto filter, I'm just opening it up all the way through. So by the time it gets to this part, which is like this crescendo, it's really, really opening at this point. And then it brings us into the drop. So again, this is using automation. Like in the program I've been doing for the last few months, Marksman's Music Academy. So he's been coaching me and teaching me a lot of these techniques, and I'd highly recommend going to check that out. Marksman's Music Academy, very, very highly recommend it. But this automation is something we talk about a lot, because like you're using automation the whole time to basically create this sense of movement in the track, and you'd be amazed at how much automation goes into really professional sounding records that your favorite producers make. A lot of what makes it sound professional is automation. So you can do a lot with that. I mean, if you even just listen to this part of the breakdown. So I've cut this pad right down. It's still going. Still going in the background. And then as it builds.
What could it be now? Don't go.
So I'm actually using automation to create a sense of it growing again. And then closing down.
Do you love me? I have to let you go.
So you can see how automation is doing most of the work there. So what else we got in here? Let's just move through some of this. We've got some strings. That's a neat little free thing from Spitfire Audio, BBC Symphony Orchestra. Some lovely sounding strings. Let's talk about speaking of strings, this little guy. This is a sample from Arcade. So Arcade is really handy for this kind of thing, and you basically get this. This is a sample called Cinematic Erhu. But what you get with this, if I can just play it. So there are just lots of little samples like this. So I can then go. So I can just play. It's almost like I'm playing phrases. I've got all these phrases, and I can then just invent my own melody using all those phrases, right? So this is what I've done. This is the MIDI. So this is phrase 1. Part of phrase 2. They're all different phrases. They're it's just like chopping up samples really, but such an easy way to do it. And every sample is in key, in time. You can just start playing. Great fun. So Arcade is a really good way to do that kind of thing. And then there's a bit of processing on there. What else have I got in here? What's that? Yeah, this is these spacey chords. I actually didn't have these in originally, but it's a really good example of like just kind of being really critical with yourself and going, like, so at this point, this is what it was like before. It's nice, but there's nothing. Do you remember I said like that mid-range, that area that ear is listening for? Like where the human voice is, where our ear is drawn to. There's not a lot in here at this point, so I just added these in, these textures. Just played in some chords, some different notes, and just messed around with it so that it sounded better. And then you can drop them away because the drums have come in, and that's inhabiting that range, right? And then also you're starting to release the cutoff on the bass and so on. Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of what's going into all the different parts here. Oh yeah, the final bit I haven't really talked about is the vocal. So I just got this bunch of vocal samples. This was off Splice actually.
Right now.
And they just,
Are we dreaming?
I just cut them all up. And then
Do you love me?
I think
What could it
we've
be now?
got some interesting bits going on here. Yeah. So you can hear some weird effects on this. So there's a bunch of this stuff happening here. So I'm sending this out. Can you hear all that weird whispering?
Are we dreaming?
So I wanted to create a sense of it, of the vocal being in a space, and that space has a sort of a weird ethereal character to it. So I sent the return out at times, using automation again, to this return channel. And this return channel has one of my favorite plugins on it called Portal. Portal is from Output, and this is a preset called Scanner. But honestly, very rarely have I seen so many presets coming with a plugin like it, and every preset is really inventive and interesting. I mean, someone could explain to you what Portal actually is, but it just seems to be like a bunch of like a ton of effects and modulators and grain synthesis and reverses, and it's just everything kind of bundled into one to create this kind of cool stack of effects, which just give you these really weird.
Are we dreaming? Are we dreaming?
And then I've just put some bass on that to kind of even widen it, and some reverb. So that's what goes in the vocal, and just by adding that touch, and again by putting it on the return channel, it can continue on. So even though I start to take it off here, it's still going. So I don't have to worry about the effect sort of cutting dead at any point. So that's good. Then let's just do a final bit on how I'm doing bus processing. So we're going to condense all those down. Got them all nicely grouped. Kick and bass together, drums and mids. Again, you could put the kick into the drums. That's what I'm doing at the moment. You might split some mids out. You might have like a vocal bit and a lead bit. It's whatever suits you, but I tend to process it all together. Then on the whole of the mid range, I am using another little bit of very gentle saturation here to kind of bring out the mids. Some EQ, make sure there's no rumble coming through. A bit of soothe just in here to kind of capture some of these little spikes as they come through.
What could it be now?
And then
Don't go.
a really bit of... I'll just move forward a bit in the project. A little bit of very gentle bus compression on there. Settings feel about right. Maybe the attack might be a little quick, but yeah, it's usually kind of a 3 to 10 I would usually put in there. Fresh, but this is like super subtle compression. There's not a lot of gain reduction happening. On the drum bus, similar sort of setup. I've got decapitator and a bit of devil lock. So if you just hear what that's like without it, and with it, just brightens it a bit, gives it a bit of edge, and then a bit of soothe on there, which I've got. There's quite extreme settings of soothe here, just to take up any harshness, and then again, bit of compression there to kind of glue all that together. Yeah, that's at 10 seconds attack. So that's gluing that all together, and then finally with the the kick and the bass, I've just got glue compressor on there, doing a bit of glue compression. That's it. That's all that's happening there. I don't tend to put a lot of saturation on the kick and bass bus. I do that, as you've seen, in the actual in the actual channels themselves. So that's all going into this mix bus, and then that all goes on to a master chain. I tend to have, so you can master it in here if you want. I ran out of CPU, I think, on this project, so I ended up putting it into a different project to master, and then in the end, Johnny, who runs the label, he mastered it as himself. A lot of labels want to do their own masters, so I've just got a bit of glue compression and limiting on here just to get some loudness, because whilst I would advise it, once you get to a certain point in your production, you're going to want to hear that's going to sound loud, because it will change the dynamics of the mix. So I would advise to, at a certain point, usually once the track's in and I've got a mix kind of broadly sort of sorted out, then I will add glue compression and limiting and just see what the whole thing sounds loud, and then usually produce into that from that point on. And then I've got a load of meters on here as well. So things like span, which is a kind of a pretty much an ever present. That's a spectrum analyzer. And it's interesting if you look at the whole curve. That's pretty good. Like bass is maybe it's a bit high. Like maybe you want that top end up a tiny bit, but it depends on the style of the track. But you can see that's a nice kind of gentle curve there. Looks pretty good. All right, so that's what goes into I Have to Let You Go. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any more questions, observations, or anything I can learn from that you've seen in my project that you want to teach me, put them into the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of thing. I'll be doing many more of them, and I will see you soon. Thank you.